And today I want to speak about a topic that is very close to my heart. I am a professional mathematician and I love math and science. At the same time, I'm a follower of Jesus Christ and I love God. So how do these two crucial parts of my personality fit together? Or put negatively, is belief in God not inconsistent with logical reasoning or the scientific method? When I was a student, I was struggling quite a bit with this question. At university, I met many bright people, students and professors, who were passionate about math and science, but were strongly convinced that there is no God. Some of them even claimed that belief in the God of the Bible or the resurrection of Jesus Christ is highly irrational. And maybe some of you here also think that you cannot hold a PhD in math and at the same time be convinced that the miracles told in the Bible actually happened. Or can you? The question is, do math and science imply an atheistic, naturalistic worldview? That is the view that everything there is can be described in terms of physics, in terms of matter and energy, space and time. Thank you. Well, I'm a mathematician, so I will be straight. After thinking quite a bit about this problem, reading some books and discussing with many people, I have come to the conclusion that the answer is a clear no. Math and science do not imply a naturalistic worldview. Quite the contrary, the thesis of my talk today is that math poses a serious challenge to a naturalistic worldview. I will try to argue that if you believe in atheistic naturalism, then there are several crucial aspects of your worldview that are in conflict with math and science. On the other hand, I will try to show that math is consistent with the Christian worldview. And I know that for some of you here, this might sound strange, maybe disturbing or even nonsensical. And I would like to ask you to wait with your final evaluation until I have argued my case. And then there will be a Q&A afterwards, and I'm looking forward to your questions and your critical comments. I will support my thesis that math poses a serious challenge to a naturalistic worldview, but is consistent with the Christian worldview by 3 points. First, we will look together at the nature of mathematics. Then we will think about the fact that abstract math can be applied in physics and other sciences. And finally, we will examine the fact that human beings have the capacity to do mathematics. So first, the nature of mathematics poses a serious challenge to a naturalistic worldview, but is consistent with the Christian worldview. And this has to do with ontological properties of mathematical objects, like the number pi. So what are these properties? First, mathematical objects are abstract. This means you cannot find them in space or time, and they have no causal effect on anything. You cannot find pi at Uni Zürich, not even at ETH. And pi has never done or caused anything. Pi just is. Next, mathematical objects are independent of human minds. For example, you might know that one cannot express pi as a fraction or as a solution to a polynomial equation with rational coefficients, or you might not know it. It has no effect on pi whatsoever. Finally, mathematical objects exist. In fact, mathematicians spend a lot of time proving that certain mathematical objects exist. For example, that the equation cos x equal to 0 has a smallest positive solution, which is pi over 2. So what has all this got to do with worldviews? More than one might think, and let me just quote here from the peer-reviewed Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. The view that mathematical objects are abstract and exist independent of human minds has considerable philosophical significance. It entails that reality extends far beyond the physical world and includes objects which aren't part of the causal and spatio-temporal order studied by the physical sciences. So, if you believe that pi exists, is abstract, and independent of human minds, and I guess that most mathematicians would subscribe to that view, then you cannot at the same time consistently hold the view that everything that is can be explained in terms of physics, because pi is non-material and exists outside of space and time. This doesn't mean that you cannot be a brilliant mathematician and hold this view, but even a brilliant mathematician can have an inconsistent worldview. That means what you believe does not fit with reality. So, the nature of mathematics poses a serious challenge to a naturalistic worldview because it cannot explain how abstract mathematical objects exist independent of human minds. By contrast, if you are not a naturalist, if you are not committed to the view that physics is all there is, then you have access to a very convincing answer to the question how mathematical objects exist. What if there is a God who is eternal, has a mind and knows everything? Then you can answer the question in an intellectually satisfying and consistent way by saying that mathematical objects exist eternally in the mind of God. And this is exactly what the Christian worldview claims. John's Gospel, one of the books of the Bible, starts with the following words: En arche en ho logos. In the beginning was logos. And this Greek word logos is usually translated as word. However, the meaning is much broader and richer than this. It combines notions like reason, wisdom, speech. Actually, our modern word logic is derived from this Greek word logos. So, in the beginning was logos, which includes math, and logos was with God, as John's Gospel continues. So, from a Christian perspective, mathematical objects exist eternally in the mind of God. Second, the fact that abstract mathematics can be applied in physics and other sciences poses a serious challenge to a naturalistic worldview, but is consistent with the Christian worldview. And more precisely, I want to think with you about the following question. How is it possible that sophisticated mathematical objects, like partial differential equations, infinite dimensional matrices, complex numbers, and so on, which are abstract and have no causal effect on the physical world, describe the universe with such astonishing accuracy? And this question, if you think about it, this lies at the heart of modern science. And some of the smartest minds have been puzzled by this. The physicist and Nobel laureate Eugene Wigner, who was an atheist, by the way, he published an influential article in 1960 with the title, The Unreasonable Effectiveness of Mathematics in the Natural Sciences. In his article, Wigner reflects upon this question and lists various examples to demonstrate that it is astonishing beyond comprehension that math can be applied in physics, chemistry, biology, or engineering. And let me give you here just two examples. The first one is about the matrix formulation of quantum mechanics due to Heisenberg, Born, and Jordan. And this relies on quite sophisticated linear algebra and functional analysis. These mathematical tools had been developed in the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th century, and they were not very popular among physicists at that time. After all, this is quite complicated stuff, as some of you know from personal experience. But it was precisely those abstract mathematical structures that helped to overcome the shortcomings of Bohr's atomic model, which tried to compare the atom to the solar system, which is intuitive but wrong. So abstract math that had not been developed for application in physics proved to be tailor-made for a situation where physical intuition failed. And moreover, and this is truly amazing, matrix mechanics correctly predicted the spectra of heavier atoms like helium even before they were empirically known. So something for the engineers now. And this is about the use of complex numbers. And let's consider just AC circles in electrical engineering. And there an important quantity is electrical impedance Z, and this measures the opposition that a circuit presents to an electric current. And the astonishing fact is that this electrical impedance is in general best described by a complex number. So that's a number of the form Z is R, this is real, plus J times X, and J is the imaginary unit. So a Electrical engineers use J instead of I because I is the electric current. And so this J is the square root of -1. So how is this possible? I mean, complex numbers had been studied by mathematicians like Gauss, Euler, or Riemann for centuries, but not for any applications in physics or electrical engineering. Mathematicians love complex analysis for the sheer beauty of the theory and nothing else. And now it's absolutely surprising that these imaginary numbers appear in the description of AC circuits, which after all are very real objects. So, how can this puzzle be solved? That abstract mass can be applied in physics and other sciences, in situations where you would not expect it. And if you are a naturalist, then you have a serious problem here. And to illustrate this, let me just give you two quotes from Wigner from his article, The Unreasonable Effectiveness of Mathematics in the Natural Sciences. So Wigner writes, "The enormous usefulness of mathematics in the natural sciences is something bordering the mysterious, and there is no rational explanation for it. The miracle of the appropriateness of the language of mathematics for the formulation of the laws of physics is a wonderful gift which we neither understand nor deserve." I find this absolutely fascinating. Wigner, a top scientist, he needs to resort to concepts clearly outside the boundary of science, like the mysterious or miracles, to explain a fundamental fact of scientific research. For him, and I guess for any honest atheist, there is no rational explanation for the fact that abstract mass that had not been developed for any applications can be so successfully applied in physics and other sciences. But this is, of course, deeply disturbing. The fact that mass can be applied in physics and other sciences is of fundamental importance for modern research. If it were not true, modern science would simply not exist. And now a worldview for which this fact has no rational explanation, but is simply a mystery or a miracle, does not seem very convincing to me, in particular not as a scientist. By contrast, if you're not a naturalist, if you're not committed to the view that there is no God, then you have access to a very convincing answer to the question why abstract mass can be applied in physics and other sciences. Let me just look here at the opening statement of the Bible. In Genesis 1, verse 1, we read, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth." So if this is true, if the universe has indeed been created by God, then we should expect to find traces of God in the physical world. So the physical world around us can be described so well by abstract mass because this is precisely the language in which it was written by God, in whose mind mathematics is. Paul Dirac, the famous quantum physicist and Nobel laureate, who also was first an atheist and then later became an agnostic, he still conceded at some point, one could perhaps describe the situation by saying that God is a mathematician of a very high order, and he used very advanced mathematics in constructing the universe. Finally, the fact that human beings have the capacity to do mathematics poses a serious challenge to a naturalistic worldview, but is consistent with the Christian worldview. And here I want to think about the question, how is it possible that the human mind can discover and understand mathematics, which is abstract and has no causal relationship to the physical world? Unlike all other sciences, mathematicians don't make experiments. They don't use their five senses or do any measurements to derive or prove mathematical results. Many objects in math are simply too abstract to be pictured. And if you had any doubt of this, just go to a lecture of functional analysis and think about infinite dimensionally locally convex vector spaces, maybe complex ones. No, instead, mathematicians use pure reason. But now the question is, how does this work? How can abstract math, which is somehow out there, be accessed with our minds in here. And second question, more fundamentally, how is it possible that human beings can reason logically in the first place? Now, if you're an atheist and therefore have to subscribe to a naturalistic account of mind, I cannot see how you could answer the first question, so this out here in their problem, consistently. So consequently, some have tried to deny that mathematical objects exist independent of human minds. This is for various reasons a very difficult position to hold, but let's concede it for the sake of the argument. Then we have solved the out there in here problem. But this still leaves us with the more fundamental question: how is it possible that human beings can reason logically? And you will agree this is surely necessary to do any kind of science successfully. Well, maybe now you think there must be an evolutionary explanation for this. But the interesting thing is, evolution does not help you here. Philosopher Thomas Nagel from NYU, who is like Wigner and convinced atheist, he writes, "It is not enough to be able to think that if there are logical truths, natural selection might very well have given me the capacity to recognize them. That cannot be my ground for trusting my reason, because even that thought implicitly relies on reason in a prior way." Put differently, arguing that our capacity for logic is a byproduct of natural selection is somewhat circular reasoning. You cannot formulate the argument without presupposing that we have the capacity to reason logically. This does not mean that our capacity for logic could not have been developed by means of evolutionary processes, but what it does mean is that reason in the first place must come from a different source. And then, of course, the question is what this source might be. Now, if you're an atheist, I think you have some very difficult questions to answer here. By contrast, if you're not an atheist, if you're not committed to the view that there is no God, then you have a very convincing answer to the question what, or better, who the source of this reason is, and why we can discover and understand mathematics, which is abstract and exists independent of human minds. The Bible claims that as human beings we are made in the image of God. And we quote again from the first book of the Bible, Genesis 1, verse 27. God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God he created them. Male and female he created them. According to the biblical worldview, every human being, every one of you and me is made in the image of God. This includes our capacity to love, our capacity to speak, our capacity to reason and do mathematics, our capacity for art, our capacity for music, our capacity for beauty, and so on. If this is true, then it makes perfect sense that we human beings can discover and understand mathematics. Because mathematics exists eternally in the mind of God, and we are made in his image. Johannes Kepler, the famous 17th century astronomer, beautifully put it like this: "The laws of nature are within the grasp of the human mind. God wanted us to recognize them by creating us after his own image so that we could share in his own thoughts." I've tried to argue that math poses a serious challenge to a naturalistic worldview, but is consistent with the Christian worldview based on the abstract nature of mathematics, the fact that abstract math can be applied in physics and other sciences, and that as human beings we have the capacity to do mathematics. If this argument is sound, it means that having a PhD in math and believing in God at the same time is not irrational. In fact, it is far more rational than having a PhD in math and believing in atheism. And this has important consequences. Maybe you have rejected the Christian faith because you thought it was inconsistent with math and science. If this is you, and you agree with what I said today, then you have rejected the Christian faith for the wrong reason. Of course, this does not mean then that Christianity is necessarily true. but it does imply that the Christian worldview is something worth exploring. And this week is the perfect opportunity to do so. So come along this evening to a talk on searching for truth in a world of fake news in the Obere Unimensa this evening at 18:15. There will be lunch bars and evening talks throughout this week. There's a table with books over there. Well, it's hidden, but it was there before, so I believe it's still there. And there are free versions of some of the biographies of Jesus. They're called Uncover. There are some books where you can think about some of the arguments I brought today and other things. Or just chat to a Christian friend or to me after this talk. In fact, I have been promised that there will be free coffee and cakes throughout the whole afternoon here. And I would love to have a chat with you why I'm convinced that the God of the Bible exists and that following Jesus Christ is the best and most important thing that you can do in life.
I'm only human after all. I'm only human after all. Don't put the blame on me. Don't put the blame on me.